Hi everyone, my name is Levi Cosijn. Welcome to this YouTube channel. In this video, I want to talk about the upcoming transit of Jupiter through the sign of Capricorn. And this will occur on December 2nd, 2019 at around 7:30 p.m. Central European Time. Now, Jupiter is going to be transiting Capricorn for a whole year. I think it's worthwhile looking at what Capricorn represents and what Jupiter represents. I'm not going to go over what it means for all ascendant signs because, all these things are so dependent upon your natal positions, right? The natal positions of the planets in your horoscope and how these transiting planets make aspects to your natal positions is, of course, going to be relevant to your personal life. But we can look at, the collective perspective here because this is happening for everyone, right? All these transits. So Jupiter is going to transit the tropical sign of Capricorn. I already made a video extensively explaining what Jupiter represents using all these categories given in these ancient texts, and I'm going to edit that video in.
First of all, I want to mention I co-authored a book with Carmina Amza, a Romanian astrologer and researcher, named Astrology Explained: Ancient Principles for the Modern Mind. This is a 210-page book thoroughly explaining the fundamentals of astrology, whether you're a Western astrologer or a Vedic astrologer. The book has 4 chapters: signs, planets, houses, and aspects. We include Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the outer planets, and we point out their intimate connection to the nodes, right? Rahu and Ketu, the north and south node of the moon. Rahu always shows where a person is in need of development. Ketu shows where we have created a security paradigm, where we suppress life energy as a consequence, and how these outer planets help to create breakthroughs on a level of identity, on a level of mind, and on a level of energy. We talk about the meanings of the houses, but also the relationship between the houses, okay, which is Bhavat Bhavam, from the house, like the house. A lot of meaning is to be derived from that. There's many cross-references to astronomy, anatomy, and psychology. We give some core challenges, advice. We apply a systematic approach, and it is a rational approach. So let's start with Jupiter. According to Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, Jupiter is large-bodied, yellow-haired and eyed, of Kapha nature, intelligent and proficient in all Shastras, which are the sacred texts. So large-bodied. After the Sun, Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. Of course, in astrology, we consider the Sun a planet, right? Scientifically, Jupiter is nicknamed the gas giant. Astronomically, it influences the Sun's orbit. So because of its gravitational pull, because of its weight, it pulls the Sun in a small orbit around itself. So these two planets are strongly connected. If we look at planetary friendships, the Sun and Jupiter are friends, right? When Jupiter looks at the Sun, aspects the Sun, conjuncts the Sun, it's going to pour its wisdom into the Sun's creative vision. If the Sun planetary aspects Jupiter, is going to create consistency in expressing wisdom and joy. When the Sun conjuncts Jupiter, is going to agitate it, though, and if it's really close to Jupiter, it's going to combust Jupiter because it's going to be too hot and it can create some problems. But on the other hand, Jupiter will delight that Sun, so they're friends. Also, when they're conjuncting, like when the Sun agitates or combusts even, there's a purification process going on in respect to what Jupiter represents, right? In respect to your children, in respect to the husband, in respect to your belief systems, and so on, okay? So large-bodied is Jupiter. It's yellow-haired and eyed. In the Sutra of the Sun, describing the Sun, it is said that the Sun is honey yellow-eyed. So yellow here, I think, connects to a certain sense of optimism, a certain sense of clairvoyance about how to follow the path, right? The path of Dharma. Jupiter is of Kapha nature. It's one of the 3 male planets together with the Sun and Mars. And the Sun and Mars are both of Pitta nature. So Pitta, Vata, Kapha are the 3 humors, the 3 doshas. Pitta is action, Kapha is passivity, and Vata is movement, right? The movement between Pitta and Kapha. So Jupiter has that quality of being a little more passive sometimes, which is good, right? It's good to be passive when it's needed. The Sun and Mars are Pitta, right? They're dry Pitta male planets who can't really relax too much, we could say, right? They always want to do something. The Sun always wants to create its vision. Mars always wants to, exert whatever the king, the Sun, wants to have done. So Jupiter is intelligent, okay? One of the names of Jupiter is Guru. Guru means heavy, right? It translates as heavy. Of course, Jupiter is heavy in knowledge. It's intelligence because Guru also means teacher, and it's proficient in all shastras, so it has a spiritual connotation. One of the names for Jupiter is also Brihaspati, which means a lord of prayer, which has a spiritual connotation, and also a mantra. Mantra are the hymns that are used for spiritual and psychological powers. So Jupiter also rules the vocal cords and sound. The element connected to Jupiter is ether, right? And sound travels through ether. I think Ken Rowe mentioned this, that people who study classical music, for example, in some way, Jupiter is also strongly involved with career factors. It's also the Lord of Eloquence. And also, if you look at Gemini, the 5th position from the Atmakaraka, right? For example, in the Navamsha, the 5th from the Swamsha, gives a talent for grammar, or in the Rashi chart, even in the natal horoscope, gives a talent for grammar. If you have Jupiter in the 2nd house, conjunct Ketu, for example, it can give a talent with language. Let's go to the next category, which is the numerical manifestation. Jupiter is the 5th planet. It's connected to overcoming adversities. If you see the truth of the matter, right? If you follow your dharma, if you follow who you truly are, you can develop a perception which enables you to overcome adversities because you see the truth of the matter, right? You're much more equipped to overcome problems when they present themselves, right? A good Jupiter always helps and protects in that manner, right? One of the names of Jupiter is Jiva, which means enlivening or living. You know, it has this protective influence. It is connected to grace, Jupiter. It's the merit we accumulated because of doing right karma, right? Doing right action, comes back to us in a form of grace. It's like good luck happens, but you know, it's all karma, right? Action, chain of actions. Jupiter is also a Samya, or a gentle planet, or in Western astrology referred to as a benefic. Benefics are much more about comforting or offering support and so on. No, the malefic planets, the cruel planets, can also give things, but they're not about comforting at all. So both gentle and cruel can give and take, but the gentle planets will do it in a more gentle and comforting way, we can say. The cruel planets like Sun, Mars, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, when they give, they always require more work. There's going to be a malefic influence to it, and when they create problems, it's always going to be a little more painful. Now, if the gentle planets take things away, for example, when you get robbed by a beautiful woman, which is Venus, right? It's a gentle planet. It can take things away, but it's going to be less cruel, we could say, compared to when you get robbed by some maniac, aggressive criminal. Jupiter is a gentle planet, but it's a male planet, a masculine planet. The Sun and Mars are also male planets, but they're cruel. Jupiter is inclined to actively put forward teachings and share its wisdom because all male planets want to do something. They're action-oriented. So Jupiter is going to have that quality of comforting as well, which is not really the case with Sun and Mars, right? They're dry planets. They want to get the job done. Jupiter is a Brahmin together with Venus. They're on the path of knowledge, okay? So Jupiter is, as a Brahmin graha, makes the moral judgment of what is right and wrong, connects to ethics and moral and so on. Jupiter is the guru, as I mentioned. It's a spiritual teacher and one who guides and supports the way to spiritual liberation by following dharma, right? Dharma means nature. Following your natural inclination gives you the power, gives you the joy to live life in a balanced manner, right? And to overcome adversity. It's a sattvic planet. Sattvic planets deal with the true nature of the self, together with the Sun and Moon, which is Jupiter, Sun, and Moon are the 3 sattvic planets. The Sun, our soul; the Moon, the mind, the reflection of the soul; and Jupiter, the planet of wisdom and balanced perspective. Jupiter knows the purpose of life, and as a consequence, it feels happy because it expresses who it is, and not because of some compensation, which is indicated by Saturn. We all have Saturn somewhere, right? We also always have Ketu somewhere, which shows where we feel not perfect, right? We're always looking for perfection, but we can't find it there, right? We have Saturn, which rules our complexes and our body identification, our mortality. So a good Jupiter gives the strength and the wisdom to see the truth of the matter and go through life with a sense of optimism. It rules the fats in the body. The taste connected to Jupiter is sweet, connected to the ether element, as I mentioned. Jupiter is also a counselor together with Venus, so there's quite some similarities between Jupiter and Venus. Jupiter is the sage that does not speak much, but its words are heavy with meaning. It's compared to Venus, which is a Rajasic Brahmin. Jupiter is a Sattvic Brahmin. Rajas, again, means mist. Rajas connects to one of the 3 gunas with passion, right? The gunas are Sattva, Rajas and Tamas are the three qualities in nature. So it's our motivation. Why do we get involved with certain things, right? It's because of a certain motivation. The sattvic motivation, we follow that thing because of who we truly are. A rajasic motivation is to avoid suffering, right? If you need to, follow a diet or something, it's not really coming from yourself, but it's like something obligated. You need to do it because you want to avoid suffering. And a rajasic motivation means there's passion involved. You're very passionate to do something. Okay, so Venus is a rajasic Brahman, right? It has that worldly, passionate quality. It has a desire connotation as well. Desire in the sense that on a worldly level, right? Jupiter is less like that. Jupiter is a sattvic planet. It deals with our true, the essence of our being. See, it's not really concerned with the outer world too much. Jupiter is also a biped, another quality it shares with Venus, right? The two Brahmins and counselors are also bipeds, and bipeds are, the humans, right? Human form, and humans are known to be the longest distance land dwellers. So this connects to having a long-term vision. Jupiter offers knowledge and wisdom through philosophy, psychology, and spiritual practice, but it's not a planet of fulfilling short-term desires. If you look at your horoscope and you see where Jupiter is, that sign, right, and whatever contains that sign, you're going to find understanding there. You're going to go into that Rashi because you understand things. You want to, these things are going to be growing, manifesting. Even if Jupiter is in a bad dignity in your natal horoscope, never forget that we have the harmonic charts or the divisional charts, right? For example, if someone has the moon debilitated in Scorpio, in the first 3 degrees of Scorpio, the moon is debilitated, it will always be in its own sign in the Navamsha, which is the ashram you belong to, which is your purpose in life. Never judge it just by looking at the Rashi chart or the natal horoscope. Then another quality, direction of gaze, is it looks everywhere equally. Okay, so the Sun and Mars, for example, they always look up. They always want to do, or they're always on to the next thing. Jupiter is looking everywhere equally. Again, it has this balanced perspective. For example, Saturn looks down, right? Always looks down. He always sees the negative. Rahu is also like that. Jupiter looks everywhere equally together with Moon. So it looks at things objectively. It takes the best option and runs with that. Then the brightness, the Sun and the Moon are the two luminaries. The Sun, the Atma, right? The soul. The Moon represents the mind, the reflection of the soul. Rahu and Ketu, the south and the north node of the Moon, are dark grahas. They are all about our shadow side. And all the other planets are Tara or starry planets, which are about developing our capabilities. Okay, so Jupiter represents the part in us that is wise, joyful, and understanding because it envisions the greater scheme of things. And also the part that wants to expand in knowledge. The tools Jupiter uses are optimism, spirituality, wisdom, and joy. Now, Jupiter is also a moist planet together with Mercury, which is interesting because the two moist planets are also the two manifesting planets. The Sun and Mars are the two dry planets. Okay? They're about rationale, objectively looking at things, not comforting at all. Wet planets, Venus and Moon, are about comforting and soothing. So moist soil is also known to be the most fertile and life-bearing. That is why Jupiter is connected to abundance, children, and wealth. And it is a manifesting planet. Mercury and Jupiter are two manifesting grahas, applying Gemini second source of strength.
I'm going to talk now about what Capricorn represents, and we can mingle those symbols, these meanings, and then see what you can derive from that. Okay, this is the goal here. Okay, so Capricorn, this is coming from Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, is ruled by Saturn, tamasic, earthy, southern, vigorous at night, back rising, large-limbed, variegated colored, moving in watery ground, four-footed at the beginning and without feet at the end, is imagined the water goer. The Lord is Saturn. Saturn rules Capricorn. We see that Saturn is strong in its own sign in Capricorn as we speak, and so Jupiter will be joining Saturn. So if we look at Lajitadi avastas, and an avasta is a condition, right? Planets can be in many, many conditions because reality and human life and our consciousness is layered, multifaceted, complex. So there's many conditions planets can be in. We have, for example, the deep Tadi avastas, which shows how the planets feel. Lajitadi avastas are also very close to that, but show more specifically the fulfillment of the planets. And there's different ways of coming about this. Lajitadi avastas are based on natural friendships, how these symbolisms match together, how they can hinder each other, how they can help each other, how can they be neutral towards each other, and so on. And the old astrologers and developers of these systems came up with ideas that reflected human life. So Lagittarya Vasta, why Saturn is going to starve any planet it's conjuncting. Conjunction means the exact meaning is two planets occupy the exact ecliptic longitude degree. But we consider planets being conjunct when they're in the same sign. Okay, so here Jupiter and Saturn are in the same sign in Capricorn. So Saturn is going to starve any planet it's conjuncting, right? Saturn is like your sick friend, so you can look at it like that. So it's going to starve, it's going to make things heavy, right? Saturn is the planet that is furthest away from the sun, right? When we look at the 7 traditional planets, Saturn is the furthest away from the sun. I'm just going to show this with a graph here because we have to talk a little bit about dignity as well, because Jupiter is in its fall or debilitated in the sign of Capricorn. So what does it mean? What do we have to think about that? Is it like doom and gloom? And we assign the moon to Cancer, right? This is Leo, which we assign the sun to. Of course, this is where the sun reaches her highest point relative to the equator, right? So it's going to be summertime in the northern hemisphere. This is the summer solstice here. And so how they assign, or they came up, or one of the ideas that we assign certain planets their domicile is this tema moon. Here we have the queen and the king, right? The king, the sun, the queen is the moon. And so equally removed from the sun, the moon, we have the signs of Mercury. Equally removed of these two main players, we have the signs of Venus. We have also the signs of Mars further, right? This is, of course, looking at the speed of the planets, right? So this is this Mars is going a lot slower than Venus, right? And then Jupiter we have as the next planet, and of course the furthest away from that is Saturn here. So Saturn is, or the Saturn ruled signs are opposite the sun and the moon sign. Okay, so we see that Saturn is furthest away from the sun. Okay, so if the sun represents our, the divine spark, the light of consciousness, that part of ourselves which is eternal, then Saturn represents the opposite of that. It represents our mortality, our body identification, right? Saturn is that point, it rules the earth. Saturn therefore represents our limitation, the body, also slowing things down, right? We need time to make sure that our actions have a certain result. And so Saturn is therefore also often mentioned as the lord of karma. But of course, it's all karma. Karma means action, right? But Saturn has that connotation. Here we see that Saturn is strong in its own sign in Capricorn, which is good. You want Saturn or any planet in a good symbolic dignity. So it means it's in its domicile. So it's at ease there. It can create some positive aspects. But Saturn's symbology is that of slowing things down. It's also the planet of your psychological complexes. Whenever there's a problem inside, right, because it's a neuter planet, Saturn is a neuter, so it works both on an internal as well as an external level. So when there's an inner complex, psychological complex, then Saturn is going to create some painful experiences in your life. Now, once you get over these complexes, once that is healed and resolved, there's no problem with Saturn in transit, okay? But he's going to bring those things up. You also have a close conjunction coming closer and closer to Pluto here, Pluto representing Shiva, which is the ego destroyer, right? Shiva destroys the old structure, things that are not helping us longer in our soul's evolution. And so, of course, when you have these two malefic planets conjuncting, there's some nasty stuff coming to the foreground. But it's a purification process. Now, luckily, Saturn is in its own sign, so it's in a good dignity. It's in a Swashta Avashta, which means self-abiding. This is one of the deep Tadya Vastas. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Lagittarya Vasta, Saturn conjuncting any planet is going to starve that planet. Of course, Jupiter is going to be in its fall, in its debilitation sign. I'm going to also discuss why that exactly is. So it's a little troubled. So Jupiter is a little troubled here, right, in this period because of the conjunction with Saturn. Saturn is going to be there for quite some time. It's going to move to Aquarius, then it's going to retrograde back into Capricorn, but they're going to be conjuncting for quite some time. And I think it's always worthwhile looking at, when this exactly the point that this happens, right? Jupiter being one of the outer planets, a slow-moving planet, representing the guru, teachers, wisdom, and so on. Transiting a certain point, changing sign is an important point, transiting or moving across this cusp here. And so it's good to look at it like a birth chart, like take a snapshot and look at the transits, what the transits are telling us. And we do see some very positive aspects here as well, right? We also see Venus is exactly conjunct the south node of the moon, opposing, of course, Rahu 180 degrees away from that, which is interesting. We have a lot of positive aspect between Mars and Rahu. We have a trine, right? This is a 120-degree aspect, which is favorable and harmonious. We also have a trine between Jupiter and Uranus, which is very interesting. So there's always a lot of stuff going on, but let's begin with the beginning. So we have Saturn ruling that particular sign. So Saturn is going to starve Jupiter, but at the same time, according to Gemini has this principle called second source of strength. This is any planet that conjuncts or Rashi aspects its own sign becomes manifesting to that sign. Then Jupiter, Mercury, and the Lord of a sign are the manifestors. So Jupiter and Mercury do it in any sign. So when Jupiter enters Capricorn, it's also going to manifest it. It's also going to Rashi aspect all the fixed signs except the fixed sign next to it, except Aquarius. And so it will manifest those signs as well, even though it's debilitated. Saturn is considered a separating influence, okay? So a separating planet, painful separator. But when it conjuncts its own sign, it does it in a less harmful way. We could say that this is the way how we go about, especially when we look at a natal horoscope or when we look at transits, periods when you, for example, running Capricorn periods, right, which is a Rashi dasha, which is a sign dasha, a period where certain things can come to fruition. And Saturn is a separating influence. When Saturn Rashi aspects any of these points that are relevant and important in that particular dasha, then it's going to create some separation, but it's not going to be too painful. It's going to be Saturn, right? It's going to be still a malefic influence, but from good dignity, planets are always less harmful. It's less tearing things apart in a way. And if things are being torn apart, then it's the consequence, the result is quite favorable afterwards. And of course, life is always moving, changing. Death is always a part of life. Saturn reminds us of that. Saturn is the limitation. It's so important because it enables us, it makes sure that we can express our being totally and fully because we have that limitation. And also, if you look at dignity and so on, I think dignity is very, very overrated. And of course, we have the zodiac, we have the division of the ecliptic in 12 signs. We also have the dignities from the fall to the exaltation. In between, we have the own sign, we have the great friend sign, the friend sign, the neutral sign, the enemy sign, the great enemy sign. So we have all these categories because we have to try to make sense of things, right? We have to qualify things a little bit to make sense in an analysis. But of course, these are all imaginary lines, so to speak. So we have to be careful, when we say Jupiter is debilitated, then your life is going to be doomed and so on. Of course, there's going to be, symbolically speaking, there's going to be some problems. There's going to be some weaknesses, right? Maybe the person, when you have your ascendant is Sagittarius, for example, and then Jupiter is debilitated, it means that maybe in terms of your life path in that particular year, it's going to become a little more difficult, or you just don't feel like powerful. You don't feel like you have the energy to really push forward. Energy levels could be low as Jupiter being your ascendant lord. But it's important also to acknowledge that Jupiter in Capricorn can give great results as well. But at the same time, and we can look at this from a more psychological or philosophical level, why Jupiter is actually not feeling superb in Capricorn. See, because the signs condition the expression of planets, because the planets represent consciousness, the signs represent, the unconscious aspects of the chart, right? They are considered the limbs of Vishnu. So it's the planet that give consciousness to the signs. So we look at what Capricorn represents symbolically, we look at Jupiter, and here we see how this matches, right? And we'll see that there's some contradictions there. And what Jupiter is the planet of wisdom, Capricorn is the 10th sign of the zodiac. It's where the persona reaches its highest strength. It's ruled by Saturn, which is the complex. It's symbolized by a crocodile, which is an animal that hasn't evolved in millennia. It's a resilient creature, and yet Capricorn is a movable sign, right? It's one of the movable signs which symbolizes a radical change often. So we have this strange climate in Capricorn. Mars is exalted there, so we have all this cruel influence working really well there. A planet in a sign, for example, in a bad dignity can show that it's difficult to work with that energy. It's difficult to come to grips with it, or we have to put in more effort to understand, really to make conscious what is unconscious relating to that sign and whatever it may represent in your personal horoscope. Okay, so it's not like a fatalistic doom thing, but it just shows like a weakness, a weakness, a sensitivity, or the person is just simply, it's difficult to become aware of these things. So it's going to be a little more painful in that sense, right? Because the suffering eventually brings out what needs to change. And it shows us, it pushes us into change. And so a debilitated planet and dignity, it's perhaps a good way to look at that from that perspective. Now, the body part connected to Saturn, or to Capricorn rather, is the thighs and the upper knees, which is of course very interesting because the thigh bone is the femur, right, which is the strongest bone in the body. So it can support 30 times the weight of the human adult. So Capricorn, as I mentioned, is also represented by a crocodile, as a resilient creature. So Capricorn is about enduring things, accomplishing things through rigorous work and perseverance, endurance, repetition, all these, Saturn connotations as well. So Capricorn, no coincidence, relating to the 10th sign of, the 10th house of the zodiac. The 10th house relates to the 10th sign. The 10th house is called Karma Bhava, so the action house, where you perform your great deeds through hard work and perseverance. The femur is the densest and the strongest bone, right? So it can take things, it can really push forward, it can carry great burdens as well. In ancient Egypt, the staff was also shaped like a femur. Later, it also became a symbol of power and authority. Capricorn ruled by Saturn, Saturn relating to the masses, right? Saturn is on the opposite side of what the sun is the king, so the Saturn represents the masses. Okay, so Capricorn is where the sun reaches its lowest point, contrary to Cancer, where it reaches its highest point relative to the equator. But it's also the 10th sign of the zodiac. So it's also that high point representing the height of personal achievement in the world. And in the book, we connected it to our personality, where the personality reaches the climax. So I'm just going to read here. The word personality originates from the Latin persona, and then Carl Jung used the term persona to describe the social phase that individual presents in the world. A kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other hand to conceal the true nature of the individual. Okay, that's what the persona is. So in a similar manner, our personality, which includes the persona, is the interface we place between us and the world. The personality developed during childhood in accordance to the exterior responses we get from certain behaviors, and includes moods, attitudes, and behavioral patterns. Personality gives a structure, right? Of course, connected to Capricorn, is about structure. It's useful in the sense that it provides coherence and identity. Capricorn is the sign relating to creating structure. The somewhat rigid and structured behavior concerned with survival and status, right? Status, definitely one of the points here. Some planets do well in Capricorn because they represent the parts of ourselves concerned with survival. Saturn is a tamasic planet, and Capricorn is a tamasic sign together with its other part here, Aquarius. Mars is exalted here. It's a fiery planet, a masculine planet. Capricorn is a feminine sign. The symbology of an exalted Mars is someone who's very aware of picking the right battles. In Hellenistic astrology, they have different ways of assessing this, right? Depending on when you were born, at day or at night. However, the Sun and Jupiter, the two sattvic planets in this Rashi, the individual may confuse the means with the sole purpose. Sounds a little drastic, but what we try to say with this is that Jupiter represents our belief, our moral ethics. So in the sign of Capricorn, which is tamasic, which is ruled by Saturn, which is about reaching a high point in that personality. It also has that resilience to it. It's not really changeable in a way, but on the other way, it can be radically transforming things. Jupiter is not feeling at its best there, right? In terms of what it represents naturally. That's how we look at it. We don't have to make it like a bad thing or like a really good thing, right? This is one of the problems with astrology, right? Because in our mind, because our minds are so dualistic, we say this is right, this is wrong, right? This is dark, this is light, and so we take it like this. So it can be a trap also and make us feel bad about it. Of course, astrology is one of these yogas that confront you with your psychological complexes, right? If you're into astrology seriously, no doubt you have come about this. But as you go along with it, you understand that it's often the mind that picks certain things and just feeds on that complex, right? Which is not really truly who we are. So we kind of dismantle that and go beyond it and see the truth of the matter and see that we're actually capable of going through battle, that we're capable of going through suffering, and that often a lot of the suffering that we endure is self-inflicted. And we see a nice trine here with Uranus, which is showing a trine, in this period, especially in the first Navamsha here. Uranus is going to move a little further, and besides the 320 point, it's going to come into the second Navamsha here, of course. So they're going to be trining for some time here in transit, and so this is going to be nice. because there's, Uranus connected to some breakthroughs on the level of identity also, right? The sun is, of course, our the core of our identity, and it's a Sattvic planet. Jupiter is also a Sattvic planet. So there's some breakthroughs in respect to these things. Since Jupiter and are both Sattvic, all right, so they express the soul. Sattva means essence, your true essence, expressing who you are for who you are. Sun and Jupiter in Capricorn will initially mistake the persona for the true being, okay? In other words, as long as the individual with these planetary combinations remains limited to the basic needs that ensure their survival, which is food, sex, emotional comfort, and inclusion in society, they will not find deeper fulfillment until they realize that Capricorn is just a phase, a necessary one in our personal development. Now, the reason why we wrote this is because if you look at the sequence in the zodiac, right? Aries, things come into being, right? The one comes into duality, into existence. Then we have this whole personal development. In Cancer, we understand what we need, right? The moon is our needs. Then we move on to Scorpio. Scorpio, there's a big shift going on. We become very aware of our psychological sensitivities, emotional sensitivities rather, right? The water signs are more connected to emotions. And then I would say the Saturn signs, Capricorn and Aquarius, are connected to psychology, right? There's a thin line there, but Saturn rule signs are coming to grips with our psychology. Right, like Yogananda said, I heard Ernst Wilhelm say it many times, is in order to become spiritually free and liberated, it's important to become psychologically stable and integer, to fight the psychological battle. And of course, Mars is exalted in one of these, the first sign coming, right? If we, follow the path through the natural sequence of the zodiac, Capricorn is that first sign. So the personality in that sense becomes very strong. It's capable of doing many things. Now, Sagittarius is the most mature of the fire signs. This is the sign really connected to leadership. I know we assign the Leo to the sun, right? The sun to Leo, which is, of course, the king. But Sagittarius is really the sign of leadership if you look at some other texts. Because Jupiter is most mature there, and of all the fire signs, right? In Aries, it's the young warrior, and then in Leo, it's the king who's responsible for what is happening around him, also the weaker and so on. In Sagittarius, it becomes a fighter, right? It shoots its arrow. It's a man on a horse, which is a quadruped, right? So it's capable of carrying great burdens, and it needs it. Why? Because it wants to shoot its arrow through Pisces. Pisces is the sign of liberation, where we find true liberation. It symbolizes elevation, right? It's connected to the ocean, where everything comes together. There's this complete connectivity and merging with the collective unconscious, whatever you want to name it. Like, this is what Pisces represents. So it shoots its arrow, which symbolizes long-term goals, to Pisces. But in order to get there, it needs to pass these two Saturn ruled signs, which are Capricorn and Aquarius. And this is now what Jupiter does. Jupiter now has the task to find out what it is, who it is, how it can bring wisdom in life through the Capricorn area. I mean, this is what we can say it on a collective level. Okay, so it's not a bad thing. It can be a challenging thing. Jupiter is a male planet, right? It wants to do something. Jupiter goes for wisdom. It's the guru. It wants to lead the way to liberation. It really wants to get to Pisces, where it has its domicile, where it feels self-abiding and confident and reached. And so, of course, all these planets here, Uranus in a trine to Jupiter, is going to help that, facilitate that process in each of one of us. The soul evolves according to the individual's actions, according to our karmas, which are taken in Capricorn, right? Representing that. But then these actions have to shift in order to include humanity and eventually the totality of life. Humanity, of course, with Aquarius, and then the totality of life, which is represented by Pisces. It's a gentle Rashi, so it's naturally more receptive after meeting its survival needs. Capricorn is also a movable sign, which is interesting. As I mentioned, represented by a crocodile, is resilient, doesn't really change, hasn't changed over millennia, but it lives in land and water. Interestingly, both Saturn signs have water connotations. Aquarius, a man with a jug of water standing in a pool of water, and then Capricorn is, of course, represented by the makara, or the crocodile. When Capricorn begins, daylight is shortest in the northern hemisphere. So Capricorn makes changes because it is burdened by new duties and because it has to ensure its survival, because it's a tamasic sign. Tamasic, ruled by Saturn. So it wants to avoid suffering. It's a mix of Pitta, Kapha, and Vata. It's an earth sign. It's also a Vaishya. All earth signs, according to Parashara Hora Shastra, are Vaishyas. often it's considered differently, right? Often the earth signs are considered the Shudras, but Parashara considers the earth signs as Vaishyas or merchant signs. So the Vaishyas are geared towards dealing with concrete value. Capricorn makes a rational judgment about how to manage its status in the world. The direction is the south direction. All earth signs are connected to the south because the earth is below our feet. The feet of the Rashis. The first half of sign of Capricorn is represented by a four-legged animal, the Makara, which makes it capable of carrying great burdens, as I mentioned. And then the second half is represented by a footless creature, the tail, which is more attuned to surrendering to the burdens of responsibility and work to meet its needs. The size is large-bodied, so Capricorn is large-bodied, which is interesting because the femur is the largest and densest bone in the body. It's an earth sign and a water goer, so again, it has both earth and water connotations. This symbolizes the need to work both on the emotional as well as the material level. So crocodiles are extremely strong species that have not evolved over millions of years because they are so well adapted to their environments. When Capricorn is afflicted, it becomes very resistant to the very necessary changes. Also, the places connected to Capricorn is swamps. Okay, so then what Gemini has to say about Capricorn. Aquatic animals, things moving in the air, planets, birds, demons, villages, kapha, itches, defects, guilds, and tumors, joints in Capricorn. So if you know Gemini Sutras, you know that here he's being quite elaborate. You know, he's really, spending some breath here. And he considers Capricorn the most fated sign. Scorpio is definitely the most intense sign according to Gemini. And then, about Taurus, for example, he mentions a quadruped. That's what he says, a quadruped. So a cow or a bull standing on four legs. But about Capricorn, he says all these things. Now, aquatic animals, of course, symbolized by the Makara, which is a creature that is strong, right? Extremely capable of taking care of its survival needs. And you'll see this, right? Ketu in Capricorn, I mean, they're really good at taking what they want, like the crocodile taking its prey by surprise with incredible volition and aggression. Things moving in the air, which of course are the planets, right? Because the planets are, of course, this huge, colossal objects in the sky which you can't move. Birds, which also can connect to psychological sensitivities, like demons is connected here as well. The villages kapha, they can feel restricted, or when things are too small for them, just sitting still, not being able to move anything as a movable sign. Itches, defects, itches can relate to mental irritation. Defects, guilt. There can be guilt for no reason. Or Saturn rules our psychological complexes, as we mentioned. And then tumors join. So when things stagnate in Capricorn, there can be disease, there can be tumors showing stagnation, right? Of course, Capricorn, its opposite sign is Cancer. And Cancer is also connected to tumors. And right, when the water stands still, there's bacteria and disease coming, right? So this is an axis of needs also. What do you need on an emotional level, on the level of heart, right, which is always connected to the water signs, but especially Cancer. And then across from that is, the world, what is your action in the world? If you are emotionally well equipped, if you are emotionally grounded, right, because it's our emotion that is pushing us forward into action. If we were strong in what we believe, in what we feel in our hearts, then of course we have the energy to push forward in the world, which is represented by Capricorn, and to take care of our material needs. Here, Parashara says, there will certainly be gains of shells, pearls, and edible vegetable produced in water. So it also has that connotation, right? These shells, pearls, and edible vegetables are all connected to water. Capricorn can be extremely stubborn, rigid, and to facilitate change. They can be sitting still, kapha, right, in a village, which is a small place, and so they can need time, a lot of time to overcome this. Things moving in the air is the planets, as I mentioned, fated things. It's a movable sign, it's about making change. But then Saturn is, of course, the slowest moving planets. Village kapha relates to being stuck in a small place and non-activity. Itches, mental irritations, as I mentioned. Defects and guilt signify psychological complexes, and tumors can be physical consequences of spiritual stagnation. Okay, this is things I already mentioned, but just to be thorough, Parashara also mentions some benefits related to this Rashi, shells, pearls, edibles, all connected to the water, which always has a spiritual or emotional connotation. And of course, the breakthroughs, the serious breakthroughs happen in Capricorn. you know, and that's interesting, I think. I mean, this is important, and of course, we all have Capricorn in our horoscope. It's not only when you have your ascendant or your 4th, 7th, or 10th house, but it's going to be important for everyone. Of course, when it's an angle, it's always going to be more important, right? Angles are about action and you know, initiating things. It's associated with the big marketplaces, you know, of where things happen, where things move, and so on. So when you're a Libra ascendant or a Cancer ascendant, Aries ascendant, or a Capricorn ascendant, it's going to be very important, this transit, of course, especially because we have all this strong malefic influence. Ketu is still there, Saturn strong in its own sign, Pluto coming closer, right? Jupiter also joining here, which is, of course, also a protective influence, Jiva, right? Enlivening. But it's also in its debilitation sign, in its fall, so it can have some difficulties there to express itself most naturally. So it will take some time, it will take more effort to find the wisdom, you know, to ground your actions. Jupiter is always a sense of optimism, going through life with a sense of optimism, because you see all the suffering, the misery in the world, and you think at a certain point, if you attach too much, you think, what's going on here, right? I mean, it can make one depressed, and but Jupiter has that sense of optimism to make the best of your world, you know, and the world, the small world around you where it starts, and then also to radiate that and to express that in larger communities, and that's important, even though it may seem like sometimes very hopeless if you look at the world situation, the world stage. Then we also wrote like a core challenge for each one of these signs, and so for Capricorn, it's to allow for the necessary changes that can lead to a deep state of self-awareness and acceptance. To allow for the necessary changes that can lead to a deep state of self-awareness and acceptance. To allow for the necessary changes that can lead to a deep state of self-awareness and acceptance. This is very important for Capricorn. And a little bit about the dignity thing, okay? So according to Hellenistic astrology, I think it's worthwhile mentioning this, we have 5 essential dignities. I'll just show it here, which is a Dorothean scheme here. I don't know if you see it completely. But there's 5 essential dignities. There's the domicile, right, which is the home, right? Mars rules Aries. The exaltation, which is where the planet has its highest expression. I can just show this exaltation graph here. When we look at the sun, right, the sun is exalted in Aries. Of course, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, the vernal equinox, right? So when the sun rises over this celestial equator, this is marks, of course, the beginning of the tropical zodiac, and so the sun is exalted there. And then if we look at the old, you know, Egyptian scheme, we could say, we see that, and even further than that, right? Babylonian, we see the sun is the king, then the moon is, of course, the queen, but at the side we have the minister, or perhaps, you know, Venus the mistress. You look at it at that. Then at the corners here, we have Mars, which is the army. We have Jupiter, which is the counselor of the king. And then across from the sun is, of course, the masses, which is Saturn. Okay, and then Mercury is a sign, because this is all the exaltation points, right? Moon is exalted in Taurus, Venus is exalted in Pisces, Mars in Capricorn, Jupiter in Cancer, right? So the opposite sign of every exaltation point, right, is always its debilitation point. So Jupiter is debilitated in the opposite sign of where it's exalted. Okay, so it's good to know the symbolism, to think about the symbolism, but don't draw your conclusions too quickly when you see a horoscope, or when you see, for example, now Jupiter transiting Capricorn, that it's going to be all doom and gloom, of course. Then here Mercury is exalted in the Virgo, which is very interesting because it has its domicile there. It also has Mula Trikona and exaltation there. So Mercury is very special. It's a versatile planet, also a neuter planet. So we have the 2 neuter planets here next to each other as well. And then Saturn is, of course, exalted in the sign of Venus, which is a Libra, right? So we will have 5 essential dignities. Triplicity, which is depending on you were born during the night and or during the day, and then the fire signs, they have a certain sequence involved. It's always Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, right? Here you see for Leo, it's Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, and so on. Then for the earth signs, it's a different arrangement. We have Venus, Moon, and Mars. So, which is important. Then we have the term or the bounds, which is a division or dividing the sign into 5 unequal portions, and each portion is assigned a specific planet, which one of the starry planets, so not including the sun and the moon. And here we see for Capricorn that you know, Mercury rules the first 6 degrees, Jupiter rules the 7th, and between the 7th and the 13th degree. So in terms of dignity, when Jupiter transits its own bounds, right, it can be that bad, right? Mercury is benefic, right? If we look at the Hellenistic perspective, Mercury is considered a gentle planet. Venus is also a gentle planet. Of course, in Vedic astrology, Mercury and Venus are exactly the two planets that are inimical, right, towards Jupiter. So they have and they are natural enemies. And so, you know, but let's not go into that, or let's not mix apples and pears. According to Hellenistic, the portions ruled by benefic planets are going to be more gentle, right? Jupiter, of course, also a gentle planet. But then here, Mars between 26 and 29 is a malefic, is a strong malefic. Saturn, of course, also. Saturn is already there in the sign. So there could be some tension here, right? If you look at it, the terms or the bounds. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because between 17 and 27 degrees, at the 27th degree of Capricorn, Jupiter is going to start becoming retrograde, and it's going to retrograde back until the 17th degree of Capricorn, and then it's going to move forward. So between the first 5.5 months, almost a half a year, Jupiter is going forward direct, and then it's going to retrograde back to 17 degrees, and then it's going to move forward, which is going to be the end of next year. Okay, so I think probably here it's going to be a little more, if we look at the collective level, it's going to be quite, you know, there's some tension. Perhaps Mars is always connected to some earthquakes and so on. Some crisis may be connected to Mars. Mars is the child of the Earth in mythology. Then we also have the decans, which is dividing the sign into 3 equal portions of 10 degrees. And here we see that, what is it here? The third one. Jupiter is ruling the first, then Mars, right? Here we have between 10 and 19 degrees. And then the Sun rules between 20 and 29. Detriment is the opposite sign of its domiciles, right? So, for example, the Moon has its domicile in Cancer, and the opposite sign of Cancer is Capricorn. So the Moon has its detriment, which is kind of a weakness to it. And then fall is, of course, its debilitation. See, so we see that fall is one of the 5 essential dignities that they use in Hellenistic. Dignity is really something that is clearly not really understood. I don't think we really, or I think we overblow it. Also in Sagittaria Vastas, for example, you know, natural friends are going to help Jupiter, right? Even if Jupiter is debilitated in your horoscope, it can be your strongest planet in Sagittaria Vastas, right? If Jupiter is debilitated, but it's strongly aspected by the Sun, for example, it's strongly aspected by Mars, it's 2 natural friends, then, and these planets are really strong, then Jupiter can come out as your best planet, even though it's debilitated. So it can have some initial problems to it. There can be some weakness in respect to what Jupiter represents. Jupiter can represent children. It can represent the husband for a woman, or for a homosexual man. It's also considered, you know, the husband. Jupiter is the karaka of wealth also, so money can be important. You know, all sorts of wealth. It's the counselor, right? Jupiter is also grammar and so on. So all these things, all these indications or, you know, connotations that Jupiter has, and there could be some problems with that. But at the same time, you know, the light of the Sun can really fuel that Jupiter, and you know, the light of the Sun, the vision of the soul, is helping Jupiter to become wise and to make wise actions. And especially if Mars is there too, then, you know, you're going to have this inspired personality, even though there is some initial problems there. Okay, and always, like, when something is bad in a horoscope, it means that it just becomes more difficult to take care of those things and to make these things more conscious. And so it's a little more painful always, right? Especially when it's a malefic, like Saturn debilitated or Mars debilitated. It can be, but I would say especially Saturn, because Saturn is debilitated in the sign of Mars, and Mars is inimical towards it. So it's in its fall, but at the same time, and Mars is also really creating problems at its natural enemy. Mars debilitated is not that bad, because Mars, you know, the Lord of Cancer, where Mars is debilitated, Moon is actually a friend towards Mars. So there's always this mitigating things going on. See, so we, as astrology evolved, we looked for these systems, to the ways of making sense of this, but we see that there's so many perspectives, right? So it's very important to take this dignity thing with a grain of salt, and to really at least spend the time testing it out, you know. For example, what is Jupiter now doing here within the first 13 degrees, which is ruled by Jupiter itself and Mercury, right? So how does it play out when you do readings, or in your own life and so on, or on the world stage? And then what happens here within the latter part of Jupiter's transit and so on, especially because it's going to be retrograde there, right? So around May of this year, half May of this year, Jupiter is going to go retrograde. You're going to feel Jupiter and what Jupiter represents coming on a collective level, coming stronger, coming more manifested. And then around half of September, Jupiter is going to go direct. So it's going to be an interesting period between half of May and half of September of 2020. Jupiter's retrogression, Saturn is still there, Pluto is still there. So I think there's going to be some serious changes there. We still have Uranus, which is luckily trining that point right here. In the Earth signs always trine, so Uranus is going to trine that point. Of course, Uranus is not going to move that fast, right? So, but we'll see. I'll just show you just a little bit here what's going on with these transits. So if I do monthly, so let's look at Jupiter's, in the still May, it's going to go, see, it's 2 months, and it's always already in the half of the sign. 3 months, then here in, let's say, April, and then May, and then it's going to go retrograde. See, it's standing still at around 27 degrees. It's going to go retrograde until 17 degrees here, and then it's going to stand still again, then it's going to move forward. And then we see this, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn has been moving further. Ketu has already moved then into the sign of Sag. So just let's look when Ketu is out of that place. So that's going to be around June. So it's going to be around the same time as I mentioned, like May, June. Ketu is leaving the sign of Capricorn, retrograding back into Sag, and then we have Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, but it's also going to retrograde back into Capricorn, right? If we go a little further, see, it's retrograding back. Okay, so whatever Capricorn represents, there's going to be Pluto, there's going to be changes there, change of structure, old structures are gone. Saturn manifests Capricorn, there's going to be things coming there as well, manifest on a concrete level. It's your 7th house, relationships, marriage, the spouse, clients, the foreign countries, and so on. All this 7th house stuff. Jupiter is always a manifester, right? According to Gemini, Jupiter is of course going to Rashi aspect all the fixed signs except Aquarius, right? So here you see it better. We see Capricorn is going to aspect Taurus, and then here Leo, and then Scorpio. So these signs are going to be under manifesting influence as well. So you can see what these signs represent for you. And if it plays out, if you see that these things are actually manifesting, you can also look back and see how Jupiter's transit through Sagittarius has manifested the dual signs. If these things have actually come to fruition for you, or certain aspects regarding these signs and what they represent in your horoscope as houses and so on, what they do. Okay, so but of course this is a general forecast, right? This is a transit. Of course, these transiting points are going to make, here you see it, aspects to the natal positions. Okay, this initial chart is the day of the transit, but here we're in September of 2020, so we see that here Mars is making a sextile to the moon. So right, if you consider this chart a natal chart, these transiting planets are constantly interacting with your natal positions, and that's what is of course relevant to your personal life, right? So I gave some information here about Capricorn, about Jupiter, their symbologies, and there's so many ways of how these archetypes can be expressed, and we express them, and hopefully you have a good year with Jupiter transiting the sign of Capricorn, and a lot of growth, and a lot of making the unconscious conscious in whatever is important for you to make you more happy and fulfilled in life. Okay, I will talk to you soon.